Rahil was 29 years old and had been rejected from 6 job interviews in 14 months by the time he decided that something inside him had to change. He worked as a junior accountant at a small firm in a mid-sized city, in a small office with 3 desks and 1 broken air conditioner, and he was very good at his job. His numbers were always correct. His files were always neat. His clients trusted him with quiet, careful things. His employer paid him a small salary that had not moved in 3 years. He had a wife who loved him carefully and a 2-year-old daughter who was learning to walk. His wife had never asked him to move to a bigger city, but he had seen her look once at a photograph of her sister's new flat in the capital, and he had understood something without either of them speaking. He wanted more for them. He wanted more for himself. The problem was that every time he sat down across from an interviewer, the small, competent man he was at his own desk disappeared. In his place sat a nervous man who spoke too quickly, gave one-word answers, forgot English words he had known since childhood, and could not remember his own achievements. 3 of the 6 rejections had come from firms where he had actually been the most qualified candidate. He knew this because he had asked, politely, over email. The recruiters had all replied with some version of the same warm sentence. "Your background is impressive, but the interview did not fully convince us." After the 6th rejection, he sat on the small balcony of his flat one Friday evening and did not move for 2 hours. His wife brought him a cup of tea and did not ask. He drank it slowly. When it was empty, he stood up and went inside and made a decision he did not yet know how to keep. He would not go to another interview until he had actually learned how to be interviewed. He gave himself 6 weeks. He began the way any small, careful person begins, by reading and listening. He watched videos late at night with his headphones and so his wife could sleep. Most of them made him feel worse. They were made by loud, confident men who told him to be more assertive, sit up straighter, make more eye contact, project his voice. He tried in front of the mirror to look confident. He looked like a man impersonating a confident man, which he was. Then one night, he found a small, quiet video made by a woman with a soft voice who spoke as though she understood what it felt like to freeze. She said several things that struck him immediately. She said the interview room was not a battle. She said the interviewer actually wanted him to be the right person because that would solve their problem too. She said preparation, done warmly, beat natural talent almost every time. And she taught him one small shape that he wrote down that night on the first page of a new notebook. Direct answer, small example, warm connection. 3 parts, 3 small pieces. That was the whole architecture of a strong answer. He tested it against himself immediately. When the interviewer at his last rejection had asked him whether he was good at working in a team, he had said, "Yes, I am." Nothing more. He now understood, sitting on his bed at midnight with the notebook on his knee, exactly why that answer had failed. "Yes, I am" was a direct answer. But it carried no example, no evidence, no warmth. It was the answer of a man giving a receipt, not the answer of a man asking to be trusted with a job. He rewrote it slowly in the notebook. "Yes, I really enjoy working in a team. At my current firm, 3 of us shared responsibility for the year-end audit last spring, and by the end of it we could almost read each other's files without asking. I think that kind of quiet teamwork is exactly what I would love to bring to your company." He said it out loud alone in the dark. It sounded warmer than anything he had said in any interview room in his life. He said it again and again. Over the next 2 weeks, he built one small answer at a time, in the same 3-part shape. He wrote down 30 of the questions he had been asked across his 6 failed interviews and the ones he had read about online. He wrote a first honest draft of each answer. Then he cut it. Then he rewrote it. Then he said it aloud, softly, in the small hours when the flat was quiet. He kept the notebook on the kitchen table so that whenever his daughter was napping and his wife was busy, he could sit down and rehearse for 20 minutes. He learned another small shape for the harder behavioral questions, the ones that began with, "Tell me about a time." He learned to walk the interviewer in his mind through the situation first, then the task, then his action, then the result. Situation, task, action, result. 4 small steps in order with warmth. He practiced on real memories from his own working life. The time he had caught a serious error in a client's tax filing 3 days before the deadline. The time he had gently disagreed with a senior partner about a valuation and had been proven right 2 weeks later. The time he had made a bad mistake early in his career, sent a report with an old version of a spreadsheet attached, and had learned that a small pause before sending an email was one of the most valuable disciplines in accounting. He wrote each of these into the notebook in the four-part shape, until the shape itself began to feel natural. He learned other small things, quietly, one at a time. He learned not to speak badly about his current employer. He learned that when an interviewer asked about his weaknesses, saying he had none was not modesty, it was disbelief. He learned to offer one real small weakness with a small, honest plan for growing past it. He learned to hold his salary expectations gently in the first meeting, not to name a number too quickly. He learned that if an interviewer asked when he could start, saying immediately made him sound desperate rather than eager. 2 weeks of notice, given warmly, made him sound like the kind of man a new employer would want to inherit. And he learned the small thing that surprised him most. He learned that the last question of any interview, when the interviewer asked whether he had any questions in return, was not a polite closing formality. It was one of the most important moments of the entire meeting. It was the moment when the interviewer stopped asking and started listening. He prepared 4 small questions and rehearsed them until they came out warmly. What did success in this role look like in the first 6 months? What did the interviewer enjoy most about working at the firm? What were the biggest challenges the team was facing? What were the next steps in the process? He carried these 4 small questions in his head like a small folded map. At the end of the 5th week, he sat down and applied to 3 firms in the capital that he had been quietly watching for months. 2 of them called him within a week. He accepted an interview with the second one, the larger firm, the one that had rejected him a year earlier when he had not known anything about interviews. He did not tell his wife how much the position paid. He did not want to hope out loud in front of her. The morning of the interview, he sat in a small cafe near the office and drank a cup of black tea slowly. He did not open the notebook. He had read it so many times that the shape lived in his mouth now, warmly, without effort. He walked into the office at exactly the right time. He shook the interviewer's hand. He sat down. And when the interviewer smiled and said, "Tell me about yourself," he did not freeze. He gave a small 2-minute introduction. Warm, direct, honest. When the interviewer asked why he was interested in the position, he offered 3 real reasons and 1 small, warm connection to the firm's most recent project, which he had read about carefully during the 6 weeks of preparation. When the interviewer asked him to walk through his experience, he did so slowly and clearly, 1 job at a time, ending with the sentence, "And now I am looking for the next step, which is why I am here today." When the interviewer asked him about a time he had made a mistake, he told the story of the spreadsheet in the 4-part shape, without hiding, without excuses, ending with the small pause discipline he had built afterwards. The interviewer smiled at this and wrote something down. At the end, when the interviewer asked whether he had any questions, he asked all 4 of his prepared questions, one at a time, warmly, and listened carefully to the answers. The interviewer talked for almost 15 minutes. Rahil understood, sitting quietly across from him, that the interview was going well. Not because he had performed, because he had prepared enough that his real self, the competent, careful man of his own office, had been able to sit in the room today instead of the frightened stranger who had shown up to the previous 6 meetings. The offer came 10 days later. It was for more money than he had allowed himself to imagine. He told his wife that evening after his daughter was asleep. She cried quietly without covering her face, and then she laughed, and then she cried again. A year and a half later, he was managing a small team of his own at the new firm. One afternoon, a junior accountant, 24 years old, came into his office holding a piece of paper with an interview date on it. The boy was shaking slightly. He asked in a small voice whether Rahil had any advice. Rahil thought for a long moment. He remembered the small notebook which he still had somewhere in a drawer. He remembered the 6 rejections. He remembered the tea on the balcony. He said only a few things, slowly, one at a time. The interviewer is not the enemy. They want you to be the right person. That will solve their problem too. Every strong answer has 3 parts: a direct reply, a small example from your real life, a warm connection to the job. For the hard behavioral questions, walk them through the situation, the task, your action, and the result. In that order, slowly, warmly. Do not speak badly about anyone you used to work with, ever. It will always come back to you. Never say you are ready to start immediately. 2 weeks of notice makes you sound like the kind of person a new firm would want to inherit. And when they ask whether you have any questions, always have four ready. That is the moment most candidates fail. It is also the moment the interview can quietly be won. The boy wrote it all down. He looked for a moment like Rahil had